Good evening. Welcome to Northbeat. I'm Megan Roberts. We begin in Yellowknife, where one man is dead after an early morning homicide. RCMP say they got a complaint just after midnight that someone had been shot inside an apartment building at 42 Con Road. When they arrived, they found a 31-year-old man suffering from a gunshot wound. Emergency crews tried to save his life, but he died on the scene. Yellowknife RCMP say this is the fourth firearm homicide in the city since November, and they want anyone with information to contact them. And in the Yukon, the territory's chief coroner has just confirmed that 2 people missing in Whitehorse have died. 36-year-old Alexander Williams and 24-year-old Cheyenne Williams were from Haines Junction. The coroner says after a vehicle collision on Miles Canyon Road on Wednesday night, police discovered their vehicle had left the road and ended up in Schwatka Lake. The vehicle was recovered yesterday and their bodies were found inside. RCMP are still investigating. Residents of Fort Good Hope in the Northwest Territories got a rare chance this week to talk about how oil production in Norman Wells affects them. The Canada Energy Regulator was in the community for a 3-day hearing. The federal regulator will use the evidence to rule on 2 proposals from Imperial Oil. Sarah Komolowski was following the hearings this week, and she joins me now with more. So what is Imperial asking for, Sarah?
So they're actually asking for 2 things, which the federal regulator, Canada Energy Regulator, has folded into one hearing process. First, they're asking for permission to use drilling to install a new pipeline under the Mackenzie River. That's to replace an old pipeline called Line 490 that was damaged a couple of years ago and caused a leak. It's leaked what's called produced water into the river, and that's water that has been treated but can still contain contaminants. And they want to use a technology called horizontal drilling, which is essentially to drill a tunnel 15 meters below the Mackenzie riverbed, and then they want to install 5 new lines. And the lines would be carrying a mix of things. One would carry natural gas, water for production, electricity, and there would be some oil in a couple of those lines as well. The company is also asked to extend its license to operate in Norman Wells for another 10 years. Right now, it's set to expire at the end of this December. So this week's hearing was one opportunity for people in Fort Good Hope, which is the first community downstream from the oil field, to give their input. And all the testimony that the community members gave this week will become part of the evidence that the regulator will use to make its decision. There will also be written evidence later from Imperial Oil and other parties.
So what are people saying then in these hearings, Sarah?
So community members in Fort Good Hope have a lot of concerns about what's happening at the oil field, especially how it might be polluting the water in Mackenzie River. The community gets its drinking water from the Mackenzie River. They fish from that river. You know, the animals are also swimming from that river, and their kids are swimming in that river because it's the only really accessible body of water. And people are really worried that it's not safe and hasn't been for years. People spoke about seeing an oily film on the water, especially since the leak of produced water a couple of years ago. And they said that they're really worried, again, that it's making them sick.
My grandkids used to go swim in a rabbit skin. I tell them, don't go in the water no more. They start getting sores, eczema. They got all these sores on them. Before that, kids never got sick from the water, but now they just get all kind of sores on them, their fingernails, their skin.
And Gully definitely wasn't the only community member who was concerned that swimming in the water was giving kids skin problems. Others spoke about the high rate of cancer in the community, which many people there do think is related to contaminants in the environment, though in the past territorial officials have said they don't think there's evidence of this. Some community members also mentioned they think the pollution is affecting fish on the river. Chief Colin Puro said that some elders haven't eaten fish in a couple of years because of those concerns. And land guardian Twyla Eji Mazazumi said it's also affecting traditional activities like fish camps for youth.
So what do they want to see from Imperial Oil?
So there was definitely some differences of opinion. There were a couple people who said that they just really didn't support anything from Imperial Oil. They don't trust the company. But many people said that they wanted more communication and transparency from Imperial. And they want to see the leadership in Fort Good Hope more involved in decision-making about the oil field.
We are decision makers in our territory, and we should be the ones making decisions on these questions, not Canada.
A couple of people suggested that there should be more frequent and clear communication from Imperial about what's happening in Norman Wells. They say that they really don't hear a lot from the company, and when they do, the information they get can be really jargony. And they also want, again, to be more included, especially when it comes to what the remediation of the oil wells will look like.
What happens next then, Sarah?
So this oral knowledge hearing this week was just a small part of the hearing process for this proposal by Imperial. There's also going to be another virtual hearing in early June where Dene and Toledo and Norman Wells will get a chance to speak. And then there's also a lot of time for written evidence or pre-recorded traditional evidence later in the summer. And the final deadline for Imperial Oil's replies is August 7th. And so then the commission will start making their decision, and they haven't said yet how long we should expect that to take.
Okay, we'll wait for that decision to come in whenever it does. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
2 NASA satellites are set to be launched next week. They'll be measuring the heat lost from the world's polar regions into space. This is what the satellites will look like. NASA says they're about the same size as a standard shoebox. The space agency says winter sea ice in the Arctic has shrunk by more than 41,000 square kilometers since the 1970s. That's more than half the size of New Brunswick. Those changes to polar ice caps affect global temperatures. The director of NASA's Earth Science Division says the data will be shared with the Canadian Space Agency.
We have a broader collaboration with our Canadian counterparts that always does involve exchange of data, but also in the future exchange of hardware and collaborating on flight missions as well.
The first satellite is set to launch early Wednesday morning. Preliminary data is expected to be sent to Mission Control 5 to 6 days after launch. The Yukon government is pausing the Yukon nominee program. The program helps businesses hire foreign workers in an effort to combat labor shortages. The government says the post-pandemic staffing crunch is mostly resolved, but the nominee applications keep pouring in. The program is now maxed out for the year. The Yukon's allocation, set by Ottawa, is 430 nominees, and nearly 600 applications have already been submitted. There's a 3-month wait for approval. Yukon Premier Ranj Pillay says the processing team is overwhelmed.
We're trying to be really respectful to the public service in the sense of let them work on the applications they have. Let's not build expectations to employers that are putting new applications in that we just don't have spots for. And the tough part about this is, we have to make sure that we don't exacerbate pressures on housing and healthcare too.
The nominee program will resume taking new applications next year. The pause does not apply to businesses in Yukon communities. It's the end of an era. After 124 years of publishing, the Whitehorse Star printed its last edition today. And some now former staff members are reflecting on what they'll miss. Here's Jim Butler, the longtime editor of the Whitehorse Star, and John Stuckey, the paper's circulation manager.
The press has had their final roll early in the afternoon of May 17th, 2024. I feel badly for the community because the capital city of the Yukon is about to lose an institution that dawned in 1899 as a tent in northern BC. And you think of how many tens of thousands of stories involving how many tens of thousands of Yukoners this paper has written about, the photos of these people that it's taken, the human interest stories of major news events, elections, Alaska Highway, other historical events, and to suddenly have that tap turned off is very jarring for me personally, since I've been a part of the company's history for about a third of its history. And I think in the first couple of weeks after we disappear, I think the community will start to miss it. Time, of course, heals just about everything. That feeling will diminish, but the first couple of weeks with no star on the newsstands in the stores will be a very unreal experience, I think, for many people. A few of our alumni members have flown here from all over Canada to witness this sad and final day, and we'll be milling around the various rooms of the building Friday afternoon after deadline, just reminiscing, probably having a few laughs, but maybe a few tears will be shed too, I expect.
The thing that's going to be, I think it's going to be missed, is all the kids that, were paper carriers. That was a huge part of it. But it's all the kids that aren't going to see their name in the paper anymore, or a picture, or that little blurb of them on the front page because they saw themselves in the parade or whatever. Those, I think, are the things that I would miss the most. You know, the actual community sort of happenings like that. So something along those lines of, you know, that it's too bad they're not going to be there anymore.
That was John Stuckey, the circulation manager for the Whitehorse Star. Today, the paper printed its final edition. The Whitehorse Star was one of the last remaining independently owned newspapers in Canada. There was a rainbow of energy in Iqaluit yesterday as people gathered to support the 2S LGBTQ+ community. The CBC's Mahnur Mubarak has more.
People came out to take a stand and show their support. It's called the Rally for Rainbow Equality. It's part of a National Rainbow Week of Action, where rallies and events are being held across Canada to show support. It's meant to fight against anti-LGBTQ legislation and hatred against the community.
It was awesome. We got to chant and tell people pride is good, and they couldn't really argue.
I'm so happy to be here. The energy is positive. It's so wonderful to hear people beeping their cars to show their support.
What we have to do is make sure that the LGBTQ issues are accepted, not just tolerated, but accepted.
Delaney Drakenberg is the lead organizer for the rally in Iqaluit and is also a member of VIDIA, a social justice organization. They said when they were a kid and realized they were transgendered, they felt alone and afraid. And they say they want the rally to be a symbol of hope.
I think hope is when you've been beaten into the dirt and you crawl out of the dirt with your nails and your teeth and you say, I will continue to fight. It is when you refuse to back down and you choose to say that your love and your light will overcome the hatred that you see.
Around 30 people showed up for the rally. Mahnur Mubarak, CBC News, Iqaluit.
Hi, I'm Vanessa.
Vanessa likes gymnastics. She loves soccer. She loves to ride her bike. She loves to stay at the park as long as she can. She shows me every day that she can do anything she puts her mind to. The War Amps is able to provide Vanessa with the devices and support that she needs because of the generosity of the public. Nothing will stop her. Any help that she ever needs is right there because of your generosity.
Thank you.
Makimuksak palilaw kapta awla yina lakpo kugyang mulo amalo kokbiyo yamo kinga diwaling mulo pangolo asyak miyo muna toyo mo ina daile takpa makimuksak palilaw simo mutay mabuhat taling ni pilariyo lak suma inyo amichwalu walang muta.
When we see Team Canada on the world stage, we're witnessing pure greatness. What we don't see is their struggle. We don't see Maggie McNeil navigating her anxiety, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander getting cut from his high school team, or Ellie Black hearing she's just too old to compete. What we don't see makes us who we are. We're all bravely facing the odds in our lives, and our bravery is our victory.
Everyone listen up.
Bursting with labor.
All these guys 21?
Thousands of residents of Fort McMurray got some encouraging news today. The danger from fire that forced them from their homes earlier this week has been downgraded. And as Julia Wong reports, that is thanks to the rain.
There is some encouraging news for evacuees from Fort McMurray. The fire danger in the area is now low, down from extreme the last few days, and that's all thanks to recent rain. Now, rain has been falling over the Fort McMurray area Thursday and today, and that's led to quieter fire activity, according to Alberta Wildfire. Now, to be clear, that fire is still a threat. It's still burning out of control, and it's still burning mere kilometers from the community. More than 6,000 people were forced out of Fort McMurray because of the threat that this fire posed, and many are now waiting the situation out. They say the rain has been encouraging, and they are hopeful about what that means. Now, officials say that they are working on a plan for residents to return. They previously said it would be Tuesday at the earliest, but it now seems like that date is open for discussion.
The rain is coming down on us, and that Mother Nature has graced us with that, and we'll take every bit of it. And with that comes, the possibility of a different return date, but we are going to make sure that it is safe to do so.
If they have it under control and they really, trust that they're giving us the right direction and everything, that it is okay to return, then for sure, we'll be going home.
The regional fire chief says they will be looking at a few benchmarks before people can go back to Fort McMurray. Alberta Wildfire says that includes the weather, how many resources are being put on the fire, and how much the fire has been contained. Officials hope to have a return plan in the coming days. Julia Wong, CBC News, Long Lake, Alberta.
The fire situation in the NWT appears to be holding steady, and there's also some good news for some regions heading into the long weekend. There are 9 active fires right now across the territory. 4 of them are in the Dutcho region. All 4 right now are being fought by fire crews. Fort Liard is still on an evacuation alert. The closest fire to that community is 19 kilometers away. Residents there are being asked to fire smart their properties. The fire danger outlook is medium to extreme across the region this weekend. In the South Slave, there are 4 active fires, but fire danger there is dropping this weekend. Right now, it's extreme in Enterprise and Fort Providence, but by Sunday, the danger is expected to be low to medium right across the region. And tonight, fire restrictions in the South Slave will be lifted. It's less than a hectare in size. NWT Fire says it is human-caused and likely from a campfire during winter months. The fire danger in the North Slave will be low in every community tomorrow. The Yukon government is preparing Whitehorse for the very real threat of a wildfire. It's building a massive permanent fuel break to protect the capital. But can you really wildfire-proof an entire city? Juanita Taylor takes us to Whitehorse to find out how the community is bracing for the big burn.
There's no shortage of spruce trees around here. Spruce trees can burn really well.
Deep in the boreal forest outside Yukon's capital, the race is on to build a massive permanent fuel break, among the first in Canada. This area just south of the city of Whitehorse is being forever changed. Old spruce and pine trees are being cleared to create a massive corridor called a fuel break.
It's kind of the balance, Like, I understand people hate to see that kind of clear cutting.
It's a big change for sure. I would argue it's necessary in this context.
But can you really wildfire-proof an entire city? I'm about to find out. Most Yukoners live here in Whitehorse, known as the Wilderness City. About 36,000 people. And just outside the city stands the biggest threat of wildfire: spruce and pine trees. The Yukon government is trying to do something about it.
So where are we heading to?
So we're gonna head south on the Copper Hall Road, down to the Mary Lake area.
I took a drive with experts on this project, Luke Bebo and Jennifer Sharp.
pretty much exclusively pine and spruce around here.
The fuel break follows an old mining road.
This is a huge clearing of trees right here. If a fire were to burn in this area towards Whitehorse, how realistic is that probability?
I think it's an inevitability, to be honest with you.
Yukon's government plans to spend $11 million to build the fuel break. When finished, it will stretch 20 kilometers long and up to 2 kilometers wide, thinning some areas, clear-cutting others, and replanting them with slower-burning trees. Its location is strategic.
Most of the time, the wind comes out of the south, out of the Carcross Valley and the Marsh Lake area in the summertime. It's like 80% of the time.
Blowing right towards Whitehorse.
There hasn't been a fire in this area since somewhere around like 1908.
So it's almost time for it to happen.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
The big worry is a catastrophic fire like this. An assessment done a few years ago found that a Fort McMurray-type fire could hit Whitehorse and likely will. Lightning strikes have also increased with the changing climate. Not wasting any time, the Yukon government started building the fuel break in 2020. Nearly 400 hectares of trees have been cleared and sent for salvaging.
So Luke, there is just so much fuel to burn here. Like, there's just so many trees.
Yeah, it's pretty wild how dense it gets to be, right? So this is exactly what it looked like before we went in. It's a big change for sure. I would argue it's necessary in this context.
Those tiny needles packed with resin can become volatile with fire.
As a fire is burning along the ground, maybe it's burning in this moss or this leaf litter that we've got here. As those flames grow, they reach up and they climb this ladder. They climb the ladder fuels and they go all the way up the tree. They torch off in those really aggressive, scary looking crown fires. They're kind of our worst enemy in some ways, but they're also part of the ecosystem.
I'm constantly concerned about it. I know that the fire seasons are getting longer. We've had more and more severe events.
Sandy Johnston's home is just across Mary Lake, less than 2 kilometers from the fuel break.
So Sandy, hot days are coming. What do you think about when it's a hot day out here?
Well, if it's low humidity for a few days, if it's above 25 degrees, and if there's a strong south wind blowing, and I smell any hint of smoke, I'm a little bit nervous.
He's been fire smarting his property more and more every year, like rigging up this vacuum to suck leaves from the roof.
We've been in full support of the development of the fuel break. It's something that we're kind of grateful to see being developed, but at the same time, there's a lot of concerns, I guess. And there may be a false sense of security from the residents of Whitehorse that the fuel break's going to save us from a wildfire, which it's not. The biggest threat to the community will be from an ember shower. Last summer you saw embers go across the Okanagan Lake.
Part of the planning is to keep ember showers like this from reaching so far by redesigning the forest and replacing spruce and pine trees with aspen.
So Jennifer, tell me more about this guy.
So we sourced the seed from Fort Nelson.
Jennifer Sharp is a forester working on the fuel break.
In the next 5 to 10 years, you'll see a sea of aspen.
Prescribed burns like this one help prepare the land for hundreds of thousands of aspen seedlings.
Talk about why aspen is so important.
Aspen don't burn as well as the trees we see in the background, which are conifers. So pine and spruce, they're more fire resistant. They don't have the ladder fuels that bring surface fire up into the trees and make fire behavior more intense. And so these species in particular are great for reducing the fire intensity if a fire was to approach this area.
To really see the magnitude of the project, I joined this Yukon government reconnaissance flight, the first of the season.
We've been working on this project for, I think, about 4 years now.
Mike Fancy and his team go up regularly to see how things are shaping up.
If it weren't for the fuel break, if there ever were a fire in the area, we would have to put the bulldozers in the ground really quickly, get down to mineral soil as fast as possible. Because of this work, not only are we able to do so with more consultation and more collaboration and less potential environmental consequence, we're able to do it on our terms.
There's a lot at stake when it comes to protecting Whitehorse. It's the major transportation, service, and government center for the entire territory.
People are really anxious. There's no two ways about it.
The Minister of Community Services, Richard Mostyn, says the fuel break is only one tool to protect the city.
Of course, the Yukon is known for its beauty, its wilderness. Why then is it so important to forever change the landscape?
I call this living infrastructure, really. So basically what we're doing is making these changes to our landscape because we're seeing the threats of our changing climate so profoundly here in the north. I mean, it's happening here faster than anywhere else in the country.
Is it enough? Will it be enough?
The short answer is no, it's not enough. The fire smarting is another very key point. You know, we all have a responsibility to play in the face of the challenges we're seeing through climate change.
In another part of the city is where I meet up with Gary Bailey,
So we're actually an urban First Nation, which is kind of a unique situation.
a member of the Kwanlundun First Nation.
My lifestyle and the way I live my life is about the land. Everything I do is connected, so it means everything to me.
Bailey says his First Nation was involved in the planning process to build the fuel break.
It's kind of the balance, eh? Like, I understand people hate to see that kind of clear cutting and stuff like that, but what would really impact everybody directly is if a fire came through and wiped everything out. Then not only is the forest gone, but so are the animals, and so are the berries, and so are all the plants, things that sustain us are gone too, right? There's a lot at stake.
Another thing that's really...
Officials say they are anticipating a normal fire season, but last year there was a record-breaking 207 wildfires.
It's certainly not to say that the risk is gone. We need to kind of stay vigilant, but I don't live in fear of this stuff. I think we have to have a healthy respect of fire and a humble relationship to it.
Our thanks to the CBC's Juanita Taylor for that piece. We do have some breaking news right now to tell you about. An evacuation alert has been issued for Old Crow in the Yukon due to the potential for flooding along the Porcupine River. This has been issued by the Yukon Emergency Measures Organization and the Vantakwitchin First Nation. Let's bring up a map now to show people the affected areas. This alert applies to people in Old Crow in evacuation zones 1, 2, and 3. We will get that map up if we can, but that map was sent out, so it is available online as well for people to take a look at the areas that are affected by this. So this is an evacuation alert for people in Old Crow in evacuation zones 1, 2, and 3. Officials do say other areas may be affected as the breakup of the Porcupine River happens. Now, the Yukon government says evacuations will begin if water rises quickly and overtops Dump Road. So that is again in Old Crow. Flood monitors at that time, if it overtops Dump Road, will start going door to door in Zone 1 and then through to Zone 2 and Zone 3, which are again on that map that you can find online. And if you're in those zones and you're getting these notifications, you should be ready to leave at a moment's notice. That's according to the Yukon government. They're also asking people to make sure they know which evacuation zone in Old Crow their home is in. Again, this is an evacuation alert, so people just need to be prepared to leave at short notice because the Porcupine River is breaking up and there is potential for flooding. When you are preparing, you should pack an emergency kit, make a plan for evacuation, and also go to the administration office in Old Crow to tell them about your evacuation plan. This is all coming from the Yukon government that alongside the Vantakwitchin First Nation has just issued this evacuation alert for Old Crow. It also says that the reception center, if anything happens, will be at the school in Old Crow if there is an evacuation. But again, right now, there is no evacuation. It is an evacuation alert. So Old Crow and the Vantakwitchin First Nation, the Yukon government, telling people to be prepared, check for their evacuation zone for the map. The map is available online through the Yukon government, and just be ready. And that is Northbeat for tonight. For news anytime, go to cbc.ca/north. Thank you for watching. I'm Megan Roberts. Have a safe weekend.